Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Grand Prairie's Entrepreneur Youth starting a nonprofit. I am so excited that we have with us today Ms. Kimberly O'Neill. She is the founder of Giving Blueprint, and she also leads Call Studio, an education and professional development initiative for nonprofit startups worldwide. And she's a founding member of Heritage Giving Fund, one of my favorite organizations in the DFW area. So with no further delay, Ms. O'Neill, I'm going to get out of your way.
All right, what is today? Today is Tuesday. Well, happy Tuesday to everybody. I'm so excited to be here. As Ms. Brown Patrick said, I am Kimberly O'Neill. I am a licensed nonprofit consultant, and I want to jump right into the heart of things today. So many times I'm asked, what does it take to start a nonprofit organization? I am a founder of a nonprofit. I am a seasoned executive in the nonprofit space. I'm also a licensed nonprofit consultant. So I want to provide you today on 10 things for you to consider before you start a nonprofit organization. And if you've already started a nonprofit, it is okay, especially if you haven't gained any traction. The tips that I'm providing today should help you establish a more stable foundation in terms of just understanding what you need to do to be able to move on. And so this is a presentation I do quite often. Am I ready? 10 things to consider before you start a nonprofit. And this is really important because so many of us start nonprofit organizations because of this heart passion that we have, because we know something needs to happen in the community. And sometimes we start them because we think that's the only way to serve our communities, not realizing there are many other ways for us to go down that route. So let's just go on and get started now. And let's just start about what we'll cover today. We're going to cover the four core areas of responsibility for new nonprofit leaders. We're going to cover the important areas of regulation and compliance, understanding the problem and the need of your mission, the non-negotiable foundation of nonprofit organizations, and why mission-driven solutions and impact are keys to success. Quick background, I'm the CEO of Giving Blueprint. What we do is we are an agency that focuses on community development and community engagement across the country. Primarily, our work is with corporations, family foundations, high wealth philanthropists, governments. Our goal is before people come into the communities to say, this is what the community needs, we want to make sure that they are evaluating what the community actually needs and ensuring that the community's voice is included in any of the solutions that they choose to bring in. I am an award-winning social innovator, educator, and entrepreneur. I focus a lot on training nonprofit startups, primarily starting in 2015, just in North Texas. But during the pandemic, we started opening our arms and really spreading to help nonprofit startups scale around the country. And I'm also a professor, a graduate professor of nonprofit management and public policy at Tulane University's John Lewis Public Administration program. I have a wealth of knowledge. It says 25 years here, but it really is now over 30 years. I'm the youngest Black woman to have served as a city manager in this country. When it comes to dollars, because I think dollars make sense, I've raised more than $20 million for social impact initiatives, and I've managed budgets of excess of $33 million. And I'll say this before we get started. If you are not paying attention to money, if you are not raising funds, a true nonprofit is not going to be able to succeed without money. I don't even care if you're running it based on volunteer initiatives. Volunteers are costly and things need to be purchased for you to be able to effectively move your mission forward. So about Call Studio, when we launched in 2015, our goal was simply to just help those that were in the North Texas area. And we had served, when we first launched, we had started serving and we launched and served more than 1,800 new nonprofit professionals. And we also provided more than 2,500 hours in professional development courses and training and mentoring and coaching services as well. And we were able to do that within our first 2 years. In terms of what I consider our greatest achievements, I train winners. I don't train losers. I want my clients to be recognized for their leadership and their services. And what we are, I think, key in doing, because it is possible, is ensuring that when we talk about raising money, that we talk about the large dollar amounts. We don't talk about small dollar amounts. So our clients have raised over $1 million, and these are new nonprofit organizations. The picture on the far right of the screen is an organization, Roses Rojo, that I worked with over a few years. We started working together in 2018. When I first met them, the first 2 years of their organization, they had raised $9,000. $9,000 total. By the end of our first 9 months together, they had crossed the six-figure mark. If you have any good nuggets today that you get, I'm a social media person. You can reach me at Just Kim Online or at Cause Studio, and you can also tweet or thread or whatever it is that we are doing now. So let's jump into it. Knowing the regulations and compliance requirements governing public charities is non-negotiable. Let's start off with this. Most times people think about, I want to start a nonprofit organization. I'll start my paperwork with the state. I'll get an EIN number, and then I'll send my paperwork over to the IRS so that I can get that 501c3 public charity status. When we think about nonprofit organizations, most of us are thinking about 501c3. 501c3s are public charities. It means that none of us own it. I might forever be the founder, and I will be the forever founder of any organization that I create. But it is important to know from the baseline that it is important for you to research all rules and regulations, because you are not the owner, which means you can be removed at any given time. Someone can shift and take your name off of the establishment of the organization. It means that one day you might not be the most effective person to run. Maybe you're not thinking as innovative. Maybe your vision, you can take your vision to a certain point, but you're not able to take it to the depths of where your mission can go. But if you don't know your federal and state requirements for launching, leading, and sustaining a nonprofit organization, just as quickly as you were able to form that organization, is just as quickly as the state and or federal government can revoke your status on both levels. It is important to know that in order for you to be a tax exempt organization, it is important for you to get that 501c3 exemption from the IRS. That is when you are telling people that your benefits, your donations are tax deductible to the extent provided by the law. It is because of that 501c3 tax regulation. So I want you to know that. Also, this is something that I've been teaching a lot of people lately, especially in the tech-driven society that we're in right now. A lot of times when we're getting donations, even if we're not soliciting donations from people around the country, one of the things, if a donation comes into us and it's from one of 41 states and the District of Columbia in this country, you are required to register as a tax-exempt entity in that state. And if you are not, you are out of compliance. So I use that as an anchor to say, sometimes we think about the only things that we need to pay attention to are the state in which we founded the organization, one, and the rules as it relates to the IRS. But it is important to know how those rules around the country impact you if you are doing business as a nonprofit in a state, or if you're soliciting, whether or not you're actively soliciting and asking, or someone is just giving it to you. You need to make sure you know what those requirements are. It is your responsibility. One of the things that I also find is that people often ask or tell me that they're running a nonprofit by themselves. Impossible. It is impossible for you to run a nonprofit on your own, because filing your state paperwork often requires, depending upon where you live and where you're founding the organization, it requires that you have at least 3 people down on that paperwork, which means you should never be running a nonprofit on your own. So one of the things I want to caution you about is don't put people down on paperwork for the sake of putting people down on paperwork. Don't put people on paperwork for the sake of putting people on paperwork just to get your process started. You should pick people that are committed to the vision, committed to your values, committed to serving the community or whatever it is that your mission is focused on. But putting people down is a financial liability. So make sure the people that you're putting down understand their responsibilities as one of the founding members and part of the governing body for the nonprofit organization. And then also familiarize yourself on what the financial structure needs to look like for your organization. One of the things that people often do is they start a nonprofit and then they haven't even considered what money looks like, what accounting looks like. Here's a tip for you. Accounting in the nonprofit industry is very different than general accounting. For those of you that have started, if you do not have an accountant, you need to get one. For those of you that haven't started a nonprofit, you need to get one in terms of when you launch, but you need to find an accountant that understands and has experience in nonprofit accounting, because there are variations, and it's important that you have someone that can provide that guidance and direction for you as it relates to a nonprofit organization. And here's one last thing around financial structure that I will add, because a lot of people don't think about this. You need a budget, one, two, and you need insurance. Operating a nonprofit without insurance is operating out of order. It doesn't matter what types of programs or services you have or don't have. The moment that you create that nonprofit and you make it available to the public, you have a governing body, board of directors, you have volunteers assisting you. You need to ensure that you are protecting the full scope of the organization. So as you're thinking about creating a nonprofit, take extra time and read through all of the material that the state that you're going to file in, that you understand all of your responsibilities, and do the same thing with the IRS. IRS.gov is your friend when it comes to tax exempt organizations. It is your friend, and we have to do better and do our due diligence in ensuring that we're able to move the needle, but that we're able to move the needle in order, decency, and in compliance with rules and regulations. To be effective, you must understand the problem and the need. And I'm holding my face like they do in cartoons or like Home Alone, because too many people start nonprofits and cannot justify why. Whenever people come to me and we start off by talking about, why do you think this organization needs to exist? They provide an example of something they've observed. Then I begin to ask questions. How do you know that it's a problem? How do you know that it's a problem that requires the creation of a nonprofit organization? How do you know that it requires the establishment of a public charity? Because we know that there's this long range problem that we need to focus on to be able to create a solution. If you have not paid attention to the data around that particular area, you're out of order. If you've not paid attention to the problem, is the problem local? Is the problem regional? Is the problem nationwide? Now, does that mean that we need to give a discount what our gut is telling us? Like, I see something happening in my community and I am jumping in response to that. No, it doesn't mean don't do that, but it does mean if you want to create something that's an actual structure, that you need to do your due diligence and understand, what is the problem? How do I know it's a problem? How do I justify that it's a problem? Where am I getting this data from? Is it hearsay or did I do some research? And then if I understand the problem, do I now understand and have I focused on what's the need? So because I know what the problem is in my community, how do I now assess what's needed to address that particular problem? It is important that you not look at it as it's all like, if you want to serve people in the community, that I want to serve all the boys in the community, I want to serve all the girls, I want to serve all women 18 to 55. That's not even your target audience. You have to know more intimately what is the actual need so that you can focus on the need and develop programs, services, and support that addresses that need specifically. And if you have questions as we go along, I'm going to try to get through all of the presentation. Drop them in the Q&A, because I want to make sure that I spend as much time as I can answering specific questions, because I think that's where the secret sauce happens as well. That's the educator in me. The next part is familiarize yourself with the subject matter areas in which the problem you want to solve resides. Who are the subject matter experts? Are you a subject matter expert? Where can you get more information about what's the background of this? Sometimes we are responding to things because we do know that it is a particular issue. But how do we go about understanding the depth of the issue area, the solutions, the better or best practices, the benchmarkings that are happening around the country, maybe in other parts of the region where you are? How do you get close to the subject matter experts? I think a lot of times, something I want you all to consider, a lot of times we think that we have to create something from scratch, and we absolutely don't. The Stanford Social Innovation Review talks about what social innovation is. Social innovation is not creating something from the ground up all the time. Sometimes we can look at subject matter experts around the country that may be serving a similar community, may be serving in a similar type of demographic. What pieces can we take from that and then make them unique for the areas that we're serving? Or how can we take information or activities or programs and benchmarking ideas from other areas and just duplicate it, not even try to change it, just duplicate it in the areas? You have to know what's available. You have to know what the community needs. You also need to, when we're talking about subject matter areas, you also need to talk to the community. Too often that we focus on creating solutions and we've not talked to anybody in the community to see if it's offensive, to see if it actually fits the narrative of what the community expects. And when we do that, I like to say we focus on assimilation, and we're really not respecting the people, the places, and the culture that we're trying to impact. So make sure that you are familiar with what needs to be done, what's already happening. Do some asset management around your own area. Who's providing comparable services? Who's providing services to this particular group? Why do I think I'm uniquely qualified, or the people that we've put together are uniquely qualified? Because you don't want to duplicate. My friend Jasmine Crowe, the founder of Gooder, always says, we might be competing for financial resources, but we should never be competing for social impact if at the end of the day, we're working on solving issues and problems around the country. Why are we competing with one another instead of focusing on how we add value to something that already exists? Or we know that we're focusing on this unique little area in the community that no one is touching, but you need to be familiar. That is your responsibility to do that. Once you take ownership and say, I want to found an organization, or I've founded an organization, it is now you and your team's responsibility to exercise extreme caution, respect, and do your due diligence to uphold the mission of the organization to the best of your abilities. Let's see. And I talked about this a little. Consideration number 3, create a list of assets and resources, that's people and organizations that currently exist in the community. Your competition can be your collaborators. And sometimes your collaborators can help to take you to the next level. So it doesn't have to be, when you're doing this asset research, it doesn't mean that you're going to look at people that are doing exactly what you want to do. But who are the people that are doing some of the things that you want to do? Who are the people that are touching the demographics that you want to touch, the neighborhoods that you want to touch? Who's providing services that you may be able to partner with to bring into your organization? You need to be very clear on what's available, and that list should evolve and continue to grow over time. But going into it, you should have a document that's at least, I would say, just something 3 to 10 pages. There's a book that a name of a book I want to give you. It's called The One-Page Business Plan for Nonprofits. The One-Page Business Plan for Nonprofits. And it is by Jim Horan, Horan, Jim Horan. For those of you that have never started a nonprofit or are still in the beginning stages of figuring out how do I get this thing started, it is a great workbook that walks you through some of the more critical areas that you need to focus on for your organization. And it will help you to think through some of the things that I'm also talking about today. But create a list. And if you have that founding team, have everybody participate in this exercise, because it allows everybody to tap into what their zones of geniuses are, what their networks might look like. So it should not be one person's responsibility, typically falls on the founder. This should be a group exercise where we're all paying attention to all of the assets and resources that can be beneficial to our organization, even if that particular organization could be considered a competitor in the work that we're doing. Let's see. What is my view? What is my view on purpose-driven over mission-driven leadership? I want to answer that one real quick, that question real quick. So I love the idea of purpose-driven initiatives, especially if we're talking about for-profit for good. When I think about purpose-driven initiatives, one of the things I mentioned in one of the earlier considerations is sometimes I don't think we always need to create a nonprofit organization. Truth be told, some of the things that some of the ideas that we have and that we're coming up with, some of those ideas could be better served if we actually started a for-profit organization where we were able to control a little bit the type of money we were donating into resources that already exist, or a mission-driven initiative that we want to focus on as well. Purpose-driven is okay if purpose is rooted in who we have to serve and not just our purpose. Because sometimes purpose-driven can be ego-driven. And I want people to be very careful and understanding and paying attention and honestly having that honest conversation with yourselves. Are you creating an organization because you want this to happen? Or are you creating an organization because it needs to happen? And when it needs to happen, it could be your purpose, but your purpose should also be mission driven, because that's the guidance for everyone in the organization. When you found a nonprofit, you should found the nonprofit with the understanding and being okay with knowing that one day you may not be in charge. And as long as the organization is taken care of, that the people, the places, and the things that the mission was designed to impact, it's still happening. Because you don't own a nonprofit, because I had to have that conversation with myself. And so I found everything that I do on the nonprofit side with the understanding that one day I will not be the person in charge. And I actually look forward to that, because at some point there is going to be someone smarter, brighter, more innovative than me. And if I'm committed to my mission, then I need to step aside and let that happen. That's my personal opinion with that. So, consideration number 4, assess if your nonprofit organization is necessary to address the need, or if the issue could be resolved through your work as a volunteer, funder, or by a for-profit body. Sometimes we say we want to create a nonprofit, not really understanding the heaviness of starting a nonprofit, because folks, it's not easy. Sometimes we can show up as a volunteer. Sometimes we can show up as a funder. And sometimes, as I mentioned, you can create something for profit that allows you to donate money. And quite honestly, you could have a greater impact if you had more access to capital to be able to impact something that really is deficient in a community. So it is important, like that gut check, that ego check. Is this needed? Or can this be solved another way? Am I the best person with my founding group to do this? And if I think that something's missing in some other organizations that already exist, have you even tried to go, if you respect those organizations, right? Have you thought about even going to them and saying, I would love to see this. What would it take to add this to your existing nonprofit? Sometimes we don't have to start at ground zero to continue with impact in the community. So that's just something to really sit with yourselves and think about. Capacity building is just as important as programs and services. We hear the term capacity building a lot in the nonprofit world. Capacity building is about elevating everything within your organization to the next level. Typically, we're talking about operations, but we're also talking about programs and services. But capacity building on the operational side is just as important as programs and services. I like to say this: the federal government, if there's no budget on October 1st of every single year, which is the first day of the fiscal year, if there is no budget that has been approved by Congress on October 1st, the federal government at 11:59 and 59 seconds Eastern Standard Time on September 30th, October 1st at midnight, the federal government shuts down. And if we think about that, why does any nonprofit operate without an approved budget from their board? The board's responsibility is to have that fiduciary responsibility and oversight of the organization. They are responsible for paying attention to the budget, to review the budget that the administration, the programs, and the services teams have put together. If there is no approved budget, an organization should not be operating. It means then from day one that you operate your organization, you should have a budget. That's part of the capacity building. So you need to be prepared to explain your connection to the need and the credentials that make you and your team the experts on the problem. Do an inventory of everybody, yourself, any key volunteers that you may have, key staff, part-time staff, full-time staff, and your board members. What connection to the mission does everybody bring? And it doesn't have to be program and service related. Maybe you need an attorney on your board. Maybe you need a CPA on your board. Everyone that has a connection to the organization that's part of the team should have something that they bring that makes them an expert at helping to move the mission forward and move the organization forward. If not, we might be placing people in opportunities that don't really serve the organization. And we do see that a lot. We see a lot of times when we're founding organizations, people like to bring in their mothers, their cousins, their friends, because they don't want anyone to tell them no. When we're really thinking about the essence of a public charity, we actually do need people to tell us no. We do need some level of checks and balances within the organization. So make sure you are paying attention to the needs of the organization and how everyone that comes into the organization's life, whether it be on the board, leadership, volunteers, or your staff, what connection do they bring? How are they an expert? Everybody is an expert in something. Everyone is an expert in something. It doesn't mean that they're the mouthpiece of the organization or they're front facing, but everyone has a level of expertise, even when they're just starting out, that they can bring to the table. For example, I like social media, but I also know younger people understand social media way better than I do. So when I'm looking for people to come into our fold, I'm looking for people that have that level of experience, and it opens the door for people who may not be as seasoned in leadership opportunities, but they're seasoned in digital marketing. So you want to make sure that you understand what are the problems that we have within the organization, and then what are the more operational things that we need in the organization to make it go. And then who are the experts to help us get to the next level? If you're not looking at your human capital means your volunteers, your staff, your board members. If you're not looking at the human capital aspect of the work that you're doing, you're missing the mark. Draft your dream and draft it loud. Draft your dream of committed board members, volunteers, and staff, knowing it will take time to cultivate the groups. Typically within the first 3 years of an organization, I hear people, talking about, I didn't pick the right board members. They're not really helping. Well, you didn't pick your draft. You didn't do a draft pick very well. right? That's often, or we pick people who are committed to us, loyal to us, but not loyal to the mission. I want the very best of everybody to be a part of an organization. So, who are those people? And everybody that's attached to the organization, especially when you're thinking about board members, those founding few people that came to the table with you, everybody should do this exercise separately. Develop a matrix of what does it mean to be inclusive in our organization. So with all of the parameters of whatever inclusivity means to your organization. So that's experience, that's demographics, that's, the educational levels, that's professional experience. And who are the top people that you know that may fit into those categories? And who are the people that you would like to know that might fit into those categories? And then who are the people that know and have access to those people if you don't? You want the best of the best when you're thinking about your board. You want the best of the best when you're thinking about your especially your key volunteers and your staff. You want people that will show up with excellence each and every time. It doesn't mean they're going to get it right all of the time, but you want them to show up in excellence each and every time because they're committed to the mission, not you. It's nice to have people that are loyal to you, but I need you to be loyal to this organization because when all else fails and if something happens to me, I want to be confident in knowing that these people will still be around. I want the best and the brightest. I want my dream team because I always want to win for the community, the people, and everything else that I serve. Develop your network, which should include donors, investors, and those who can help you expand to new connections. So I want to talk about something a little bit here. There is a way that people can get started a lot faster in terms of raising money. We look for creating the standalone nonprofit, filing our paperwork on the state level, filing our paperwork with the IRS. And I think that that is fine. But something I want people to be a little bit more open to, which will allow them to plan and raise money and then allow people to get that tax exemption to the extent provided by law for donations, is to consider fiscal sponsorship. Fiscal sponsorship is actually something that's very recognized and suggested by the IRS. It is when someone with a philanthropic or a charitable initiative goes to an existing nonprofit, and I have some recommendations around that as well, goes to an existing nonprofit and they become a program or service under that organization. What that allows you to do is more immediately begin to raise money. It allows you to be able to compete for grant funding a lot differently, especially if that organization is seasoned, has been around, has an audit, very healthy when it comes to their finances. There are a number of fiscal sponsors around the country. I only recommend about 5 throughout the country. I've been studying them for years. I look for organizations where fiscal sponsorship is their business model. I look for organizations that bring in at least 10 million or more. I look for organizations that have a separate team of people that really focus on helping people to run their fiscally sponsored initiatives. And so a fiscal sponsor is really your back office. It doesn't require you to have an IRS 501c3 status. It does not necessarily require that you have an entity on the state level because you're operating as a program or service underneath their umbrella, which means you utilize their 501c3 status. So if you look at fiscal sponsorship, it allows you to engage and go after donors and investors a lot differently. It mitigates and removes some of the potential risks that people see when you're first starting out. I like to recommend that people, if you're really just getting started out, that you may look at a fiscal sponsor just for your first 3 years, which are really very critical because there are some funders, even if they want to give you the money, there are some funders that cannot give you the money because of their internal corporate policies, which say they cannot give to organizations that have not been around at least 3 years by that 501c3 status. So I want you to look at What kind of network can I put together? How can I raise $50,000 to $100,000 before I even start providing programs and services? How do I really cultivate the back end of what this organization is going to look like, so that when it is time to go, I already have these people that are supporting us financially. How do I begin to establish my connections? And some of it's almost like if you try to get a black card from American Express and you have no credit, we know that you're probably not going to get that, right? But if you have a relationship with someone and someone can add you as an authorized signer, that you'll be able to utilize the benefits of that black card. And depending upon American Express's rules, your credit score might go up as long as those bills are paid on time. That's the equivalent of a fiscal sponsor, right? So it's something to really consider and look into. And it helps to build that donor network, that investor network, because it adds a level of credibility for you before you even get started on day one. Mission-driven solutions and impact are key. So let me look at these questions. When you receive the federal 501c3 status, does it cover you being able to receive donations from those 41 states? No. That's a good question. No. When you file and receive your 501c3 status from the IRS, the only thing that it says is that you're able to provide a letter to a donor that says, based on your donation, to the extent allowed by the IRS, you are able to write off this donation. To address the 41 states and the District of Columbia, you actually have to file in each of those areas. So the same way that you would file your paperwork to file on the state level where you're going to incorporate the nonprofit, you would need to go, and I have a list that I can provide to the city of Grand Prairie to send out to you. But you want to go to each of those states, fill out that paperwork. And here's what I say: it is better to be in compliance than non-compliance. So what I typically tell my clients to do: where have you gotten donations? What states have you got donations from? Look at those states, focus on registering in those states first, and then create a plan to backtrack and then apply for status in all of them. Because once it's done, it's done. And then you keep a spreadsheet on: how often do I need to renew this? Do I need to renew this? What is it that this state requires for me to keep this designation, this charitable solicitation designation in their states? But no, it does not automatically qualify for the 41 states. The state rules and the IRS rules are totally different and governed very differently. And then, can a nonprofit sell items like t-shirts online? Absolutely. A nonprofit can sell t-shirts online. What I would say is make sure you're communicating with your nonprofit accountant to make sure that you understand all the rules and regulations on selling merchandise, and if there's anything else that's required. So I'm answering that question very loosely, but there's also it depends on the end. So yes, you can do it, but you want to make sure that you're doing it in compliance and in order. So just make sure you talk to your nonprofit accountant to make sure of anything else that you may need to do or may not need to do as you're thinking. And I'll add to this, another area that also is very important for people to pay attention to is, I remember I was running a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and there was a state that we were going to have a fundraiser in. So I had to follow that state's fundraising guidelines, which included rules around whether or not we could have a raffle. So a raffle was one of the item areas that we were going to focus on for a part of our fundraising strategy, but we could not because of that state's regulations. That's how different every state can be as it relates to nonprofits and how nonprofits are governed, whether or not you were incorporated as a nonprofit in that particular state. So consideration number 8, be clear on how you define your target audience. I have this question a lot, and there's a lot of struggles when people tell me I serve all women. You can't serve all women. There's so many different elements into what a woman is. So I serve everyone 18 to 55 with the same program and service. I'm 50. You can't serve me the same way you serve an 18-year-old. So you need to clearly define who your target audience is, and you start with, I want to serve all women. Why do you want to serve all women? Well, I want to serve all women who have been displaced. Displaced from where? Well, they lost their job. Lost what kind of job? Lost their job during the pandemic. What particular area are you talking about? Well, I want to do the city of Dallas. Why do you want to do the city of Dallas? Well, I really want to focus on the city of Arlington. Well, why do you want to focus on the city of Arlington when you're based in the city of Grand Prairie? So I begin to ask all of these questions, right? About why are you serving? Because I want you to get to the root so you can say, I want to serve women. I want to serve women that are between 30 and 35. I want to serve women that are between 30 and 35 that do not have a 4-year degree. I want to serve women who are between 30 and 35 who don't have a 4-year degree, who live in the city of Grand Prairie. I want to focus on women between 30 to 35 who do not have a degree, who live in the city of Grand Prairie, who are displaced from their jobs, and they need additional training. You have to get that granular when you're talking about your target audience, because all of that experience and research that I talked about at the earlier part of this call, this is when identifying your target audience comes to life. If you understand the problem, if you understand the need, then you'll understand what that target audience needs to look like. Right? Because if the problem is about displaced people, women who live in the city of Grand Prairie, who lost their jobs during the pandemic, have not been able to find a job, it's because they don't have a 4-year degree. But we know about workforce development programs. Like, you have to be the expert. You have to be able to understand, because you have to be able to explain. And this is really critical when you're talking to funders and stakeholders going after grants, trying to raise money. You want to make sure you're addressing something, the problem and the need, because you've done your homework. This is how you set your target audience adequately. How can I connect with you? I will talk to you about that after. I'm going to get through these last 2 points. If you have other questions, please begin to drop them in the Q&A, because I want to make sure I can get to as many questions as I can. Number 9, use your knowledge to design. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Use your knowledge to design one solution for the issue, be it a program, product, or service. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people tell me all of the things they do in a new nonprofit. And if you are a nonprofit leader like me who knows how to get public information about your organization, the first thing I'm always going to do is go pull your 990. Your 990 is equivalent to your 1040 with the IRS. A 990 is required for all 501c3s unless you have a religious, there are some exemptions. For example, churches, religious organizations don't have to provide their financials to the IRS. But for all organizations that are required, that is a public document. You can get it from GuideStar. You can get it from Charity Navigator. You can go directly to the IRS to see. And so when I see that people have filed a 990N, 990, the letter N, that is considered a postcard 990. What that says to me and to everyone else is that you didn't bring in more than $50,000 in your previous operating year, your previous fiscal year. So if you tell me you do 10 programs and services, but you didn't bring in more than $50,000, what I know for sure is you're not doing something with excellence. You sound like you're busy, but it doesn't sound like you're going to be impactful. So your proximity to what you can do is closely aligned to how much money you bring in. So I like to recommend that people focus on one program, one service, one product, one solution as they're getting started. It doesn't mean that these 4 or 5 other things that you want to do, that you don't focus on them. But what it does mean is let's focus on doing something in excellence. These programs that you're creating for these problems and the needs in the community didn't start overnight, and you're not going to solve them overnight. And it is not your responsibility to fix them overnight and or by yourself. So be very diligent, create something, have the long range vision, but focus on the one, possibly 2, if it's adjacent to the one. And here's the thing that it shouldn't be. Don't do fundraisers and consider your fundraisers as your programs or service. A fundraiser is just that, it's a fundraiser, but it's not a program or service. What programs and services are you doing that move the mission, move the needle of your mission forward? Right? Not just for exposure, but for impact and change. Focus on one thing. I promise you, the folks that I work with that focus on one, possibly two programs, services, or products for the nonprofit are the ones that have excelled. The other ones that have struggled are the ones that I continue to provide guidance. You're doing too much. We need to pull back. We need to slow down. Those are typically the organizations that dissolve very quickly. Here is a stat for you. 1 out of every 2 new nonprofits fail annually. 1 out of every 2 new nonprofits nationwide fail annually. The likelihood of an organization succeeding without being able to raise at least $100,000 consistently increases. So if you're not able to raise money to do the work that you're trying to do, the likelihood of your organization being able to succeed goes down drastically. Okay. And then finally, go into this endeavor knowing the results and impact you want to have on the community and those impacted by the issue. You have to start with the end in mind. Even if what you see as the end of the road does not happen in your lifetime, does not happen while you're in leadership. There can be pieces and a gradual steps, but sometimes we're working to eradicate something. Sometimes we're working to reduce something. That's our responsibility to approach our work like that every single day. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen while you're in leadership or even while you're around. I know a lot of the work that I do I will never see the results in my lifetime. But I operate and run my business and our work as if it will happen in my lifetime, because I'm setting the tone for another leader, other governing bodies, other volunteers, other staff members to be able to carry the torch when I step back. So you have to go into this understanding what is the end goal. Here's what the end goal is not for some of you, because I hear this too. And if it's not, you don't take offense to it, but I do like to, it's not a building. It's not a car. Because when I talk to people, what's the end road for you? I want a building. Okay, what do you need the building for? And is a building needed to do that? Or that can be a part of the vision. That's not the mission. The mission is not to have a building. The mission is to do the work, right? And so I want you to really go into this understanding what the end result will be. I will try to dissuade people from starting a nonprofit because I know there's so many regulations many people aren't ready for. But I will always support someone who has something, who has done the research, who can articulate to me, no, I know this is a problem, but Kimberly, I don't know how to research it. I don't know where to begin researching. I will work with people that have that much desire to serve the community, and they just might not have the experience to understand how to navigate the nonprofit sector yet. That's quite possible. But who I don't serve and what I hope that we see kind of reduce are people that are starting nonprofits because it's something that fulfills their own purpose. And it's not about fulfilling the needs or problem that they've observed within the community. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I am going to look through them real quick to see if there's anything that I didn't get. Do you recommend doing your nonprofit as a faith-based organization only if it's needed? Only if it's needed. I make no recommendations on faith-based or not being faith-based and let me be clear, faith-based is not the same as religious organization. So I don't think there's anything wrong with starting a faith-based organization. I have run someone else's family foundation that was faith-based, but it is a public charity. And when you are faith-based as a public charity, it does mean that you cannot discount or eliminate serving someone because they don't want to participate in any of the faith-based related services or offerings that you may provide. And so I think it's important that if you are going to create a faith-based nonprofit 501c3 organization, I do think it's important that you really understand what that means and then think about your mission. And can you move forward with your mission and your work with some of the constraints that are around a faith-based 501c3 that has not been founded as a religious-based organization with the IRS. I make for that, I would go to irs.gov and just look up the information about religious organizations and see if what you're thinking about is a religious organization or if you're really thinking about a public charity that has some faith-based components to it. Just know that there are restrictions and that you cannot discount with public dollars. You cannot discount serving people who may not want to participate in some of the more faith-based activities that your organization may want to provide. I came on during consideration of number 4, and I see this is being recorded and will be shared. Great presentation. Thank you so much. I have a family and youth consulting business and want to transform my teen program into a nonprofit. How can I ensure I keep the two separate? I have a family and youth consultant business and want to transform my teen program into a nonprofit. I think we would have to have a longer separate conversation on that. Because I would, before I could give you any recommendations, I want you to make sure that there is a clean line between the two so that people don't assume that you are creating a nonprofit to get nonprofit dollars. There's just a lot of things just to protect yourself. But from what I'm hearing, that actually might be a good opportunity to consider fiscal sponsorship for the teen side as you get started to see if you even want it as a nonprofit. It's a great way to kind of pilot something without doing all of the paperwork. It's a great way to be able to raise funding quite quickly as compared to starting a standalone nonprofit. I will provide, Kay, let me know. I think I'll only have about three minutes left, but for those of you that are looking to get in touch with me, you can reach me. I am always on social media at Just Kim Online, everywhere on social media, including on LinkedIn. But if you'd like to connect with me directly, you can connect with my team. You can email connect, CONNECT, at givingblueprint.com. Connect at givingblueprint.com. For those of you that are interested in joining an intensive, or learning more about some of the work that we do have an upcoming conference at the end of the year. And as I told the city of Grand Prairie, that I am happy to provide a discount for anyone that has participated in this. So I'll provide that information so that it can be mailed out to you. Our conference is at the Westin Galleria Dallas, August 31st through September 2nd. We have a 3-day and a 2-day option. Would love to see people there. But if you'd like to figure out just if we can work together, how we can work together, we always offer complimentary discovery calls to people. We do 15 minutes, either me or one of my team members, just to talk through what are you looking to do. We can provide guidance, may make some other recommendations for other people or services that may be able to help you better. But the goal is to keep our sector healthy. The goal is to keep our sector healthy. The for-profit sector, when one company messes up and their competitor is right there, no one challenges the whole industry. But in the nonprofit side, when one of us makes an egregious mistake, whether it's intentional or non-intentional, everybody blames the nonprofit community. And so we have to be a little bit more responsible in how we go about setting up our nonprofits, why we're setting up nonprofits, and how we keep them going, to be ethical, to be fair, but most importantly, to be good stewards of the responsibility when we decide that we want to found something to serve the people, places, and things that mean the most to us. And so I hope that this information has been helpful. And I hope it's been helpful. I'm happy to help offline if you need that help. Thank you for the information and just the opportunity, Kay, for allowing me to come on today and share. And I hope we got it done within the hour. And I'm going to hand it back over to you, Kay, because we have 1 minute left to go.
You did an amazing job. You got it in there and you were able to answer the questions. So I truly appreciate it. I was taking my notes. Some great information, very helpful. I want to tell the attendees, you all will receive an email. It will have the copy of this presentation. It will have the link to the recording so that if you want to share with anyone in your organization, if you have an organization or you would like to just resurface any of the information that Kimberly provided, and you will receive a link to the survey to assist us in future planning. And we will provide the feedback to Ms. O'Neill as well, because that can assist her as well. So please take the survey. The link is in the chat, but you will also receive that in your email. I look forward to you all participating in the future. Kimberly, I can't wait to do more things with you. Information was absolutely amazing. You're a powerhouse, and I truly appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So
No
no
problem.
further-
Happy to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a good day.